In commemoration of the Al-Quds Day, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei rejected deals between some Arab countries and the Israeli regime aimed at undermining Muslim unity. Violent repression by state security forces against anti-government demonstrators in Colombia continues, with at least 37 people killed. Crucial elections in Scotland. The counting of votes is proceeding this Friday, with the Scottish National Party hopeful to get a majority solid enough to call for a new referendum on independence. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. In commemoration of the Al-Quds Day, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei rejected deals between some Arab countries and the Israeli regime aimed at undermining Muslim unity.
Just now, we had a COVID-19 task force meeting, and we decided to extend the state of emergency until May 31st, and will extend its scope to include the prefectures of Aichi and Fukuoka.
And every last Friday of Ramadan holy month marks the International Al-Quds Day, since the Islamic Republic of Iran commenced the celebrations in 1979 to express support for the Palestinians and also to oppose Zionism and Israel. The date opposes to the Jerusalem Day celebration instituted by Israel in May 1968. To commemorate Al-Quds Day is to keep in mind that the criminal alliance between imperialism and Zionism prevents the realization of the delayed Palestinian state, makes impossible the freedom of millions of human beings who suffer daily harassment, the demolition of their homes, and the destruction of their crops, the segregation of their towns and villages by a wall of 720 kilometers long, the prohibition to move freely through their territory with the installation of 1,500 military checkpoints, and also the impediment to return to their homes of millions of Palestinians. Quds Day protests have been held in parts of the Middle East and in several European cities, as well as the United States. In 2020, for the first time, the Quds Day event was held virtually in Iran amid the COVID-19 pandemic. On Friday, Myanmar ethnic Karen guerrillas burnt down a military outpost, capturing it without a fight, Karen National Liberation Army's Major General Ner Damia said. Fighting between the Karen guerrillas and the Myanmar army has escalated since the military takeover in February overthrew the nation's elected civilian government. Also, Karen guerrillas' armed wing has reported being training hundreds of young activists from the cities in the rudiments of guerrilla warfare. However, Myanmar military warplanes have launched around 30 attacks since the end of March, targeting Karen villages as well as positions held by the resistance movement, according to 8 groups active in the area. An estimated 50,000 people have left their homes in recent weeks to escape the threat of airstrikes. On Friday, police in the Maldives informed that the explosion that wounded former President Mohamed Nasheed and 4 others was an act of terror, and they are attempting to identify 4 possible suspects. The current Speaker of Parliament was wounded in the blast outside his home on Thursday night as he was about to get into his car. Local media reported that a homemade explosive device was planted on a motorbike that was parked nearby. The hospital treating the former president said he had suffered multiple injuries but was in a stable condition. 4 other people are reported to have been injured, including Nasheed's bodyguards and bystanders. A team from the Australian Federal Police Force will travel to the Maldives to help in the investigation. President Ibrahim Solih described the explosion as an attack on Maldives' democracy and economy.
Police for the service is currently investigating the act of terror targeting the Speaker of Parliament, former President Mohamed Nasheed, which occurred on 6th May in Neelofar Hingung as an urgent priority. MPS, the Molis for the service, received information of this attack at 20:36 hours on the 6th of May 2021. At approximately 20:38 hours, police first responders attended the scene and immediately initiated investigative protocols. All necessary resources available for investigation and forensic teams are being utilized to aid in this purpose.
In Argentina, more and more sectors are joining the demand for pharmaceutical corporations to lift the patents of vaccines against COVID-19. Scientists from the South American country are promoting this international campaign. We have more details in the following report by our correspondent Carolina Silvestre.
At the G20 Leaders Summit held in November 2020, the Argentine president himself proposed declaring vaccines against the novel coronavirus a global public good.
Argentina is also committed to any regional or global initiative aimed at facilitating universal and equitable access to medicines, treatments, and vaccines. Cooperation and solidarity are the two elements to fight against the pandemic. This fight is not only of governments, it is a collective responsibility of the international community that requires subscribing to a great pact of global solidarity.
For the researcher and specialist in international health and health policies at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council of Argentina, Marcela Velardo, the main obstacle to universal access to vaccines are the exclusive rights granted by patents.
They generate monopolies in favor of big pharmaceutical companies. It is estimated that 3/4 of the funding for COVID vaccine research comes from public investment, but it is only big pharmaceutical which is operating as an economic cartel that benefits from the investment. Intellectual property rights means that pharmaceutical companies maintain exclusive and absolute control over production, distribution, and market pricing.
For Argentine scientists, given the situation that humanity is facing, it is inconceivable to wait the 20 years required for the expiration of patents on vaccines against COVID-19.
A waiver within the World Trade Organization will allow all countries not to have to comply with patents in their national territory, but countries, their governments, can also release the patents to produce the vaccine locally if they have the productive capacity to do so. And there are already several organizations worldwide that we are cooperating to denounce the dangers of marginalizing the countries of the South in the access to vaccines.
More and more governments, voices, and sectors of the world are making the same demand.
Several intellectuals such as Silvia Rodriguez, Dilma Rousseff, Piedad Córdoba, Atilio Borón, and so many others. The purpose of this campaign is to make visible that there are countries that concentrate the largest amount of vaccines produced and others that have not yet received anything, and it is sense to push, accompany, and strengthen the initiative of some states to suspend, at least for the duration of the pandemic, the intellectual property rights of vaccines and medicines.
The global crisis is so deep and the pandemic so uncontrollable that even the United States and the European Union have now agreed to lift patent protections. Although this is not enough to make it a reality, since it will be the pharmaceutical corporations who will make the final decision.
Carolina Silvestre, teleSUR, Buenos Aires.
In Japan, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga formalized at a task force meeting the decision to continue COVID-19 restrictions. The third state of emergency during the pandemic has been put in place just before the Summer Tokyo Olympics to be held in less than 3 months.
Just now, we had a COVID-19 task force meeting, and we decided to extend the state of emergency until May 31st, and will extend its scope to include the prefectures of Aichi and Fukuoka.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada in the capital of the country. The monument was installed in the square of the University of Rosario, only 3 blocks away from the Casa de Nariño, the presidential headquarters. The indigenous people shouted slogans in favor of the national strike that is taking place in the country. Last April 28th, at the beginning of the national demonstrations, they tore down the statue of Sebastián de Belalcázar in Cali. In that occasion, the indigenous leader Pedro Velasco, governor of the Misak people, expressed that these monuments are a colonialist reminder against the historical memory of his community. The Misak people, one of the native peoples of pre-colonial Colombia, were almost massacred during the Spanish colonization. Police officers arrived at the place. The Argentine President Alberto Fernández and the former Bolivian President Evo Morales condemned the repression unleashed in Colombia. On his official Twitter account, Fernández stated, "It is with concern that I observe the repression unleashed in the face of the social protests that have occurred in Colombia. I pray for the Colombian people to regain social peace." Also, Evo Morales assured that Colombia is suffering what Bolivia experienced in 2003. The Colombian people are suffering from the repression that seeks to impose the neoliberal recipe of the impuestazo. International organizations must stop the violence. Social demands must give way to structural changes. On Thursday, British and Irish trade unions sent a letter to the foreign ministries of both countries to condemn the intense state of violence taking place in Colombia since the latest round of national strike protests began on April 28th. With human rights organizations reporting up to 37 people killed by state securities so far and hundreds more injured and detained, the unions have called for the British and Irish governments to formally denounce the violence and also to demand accountability for the perpetrators. The letter, signed by Britain's Trades Union Congress, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and the Scottish Trades Union Congress, as well as 20 other individual unions, reaffirmed their commitment to not stay silent in the face of these brutal attacks against demonstrators, and stated their support for the right of every Colombian to protest and to raise their voice to demand a better future. It should be recalled that Colombia has been the most dangerous country in the world for trade unionists for several decades. This Thursday, Colombians residents in the Spanish capital Madrid mobilized to show their solidarity with the population and social movements in Colombia and condemned the deadly repression they have been subjected for the past week. Similar scenes were also seen in the German capital Berlin, as well as in New York, the United States. For the 9th consecutive day, this Thursday, Colombians took to the streets once again in defiance of a violent crackdown by security forces and to demand the implementation of social policies to overcome the economic crisis resulting from the pandemic. According to the NGO Temblores, which provides information on police abuse, over 1,700 cases of police violence have been reported. Of these, over 200 people have suffered physical violence by the police, 98 have suffered gunshot wounds, and 37 have been killed. 26 people have sustained eye injuries as a result of the deliberate police practice of shooting at demonstrators' faces. Over 900 people have been arrested, and 11 cases of sexual abuse by security forces have been confirmed. These figures are based on the information available, but the National Strike Committee and other organizations continue to collect all complaints from victims of police brutality to identify the exact number of deaths and injuries, stressing that the process is limited because health workers have orders not to provide information to human rights organizations. On Thursday, police in unmarked vehicles and disguised as civilians attacked peaceful protesters with firearms in the Colombian city of Cali, in Valle del Cauca department, which has seen violent repression by state security forces over the past week. In footage shared on social media, protesters denounced the attacks on a peaceful mobilization, showing evidence of the efforts by police to conceal their identities in an attempt to sow the chaos. Locals moved to stop the bloodshed, taking control of a van carrying 20 plainclothed officers who fled the scene while shooting at protesters. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Crucial elections in Scotland. The counting of votes is proceeding this Friday, with the Scottish National Party hopeful to get a majority solid enough to call for a new referendum on independence from England. The Scottish National Party has held 3 for the first 4 constituencies declared in the Scottish Parliament election. This year's election is considered to be one of the most important since the Scottish Parliament opened in 1999. The Scottish National Party held Aberdeen Donside, with Councillor Jackie Dunbar taking the seat previously filled by Mark MacDonald, who resigned from the party after allegations of inappropriate behaviour towards women. The Scottish went on to hold the Western Isles seat, with Alasdair Allan polling more than 7,000 votes. They also held the Clydebank and Milngavie seats, with the newcomer Maureen McNair elected to replace Gil Patterson.
Well, I hope the SNP win because we're looking for a second independence referendum, especially since we've now left the EU. I'm also hoping that the Greens will hopefully get a couple more seats because I think that climate change is something that really needs to be addressed now. So hopefully less seats for Conservatives.
Hoping that the SNP don't get in, but I think they will. But I'd like Labour to do it because I think SNP are just too focused, to me, independence, which I don't want. I'd rather be stuck together. We've got the healthcare needs to get taken care of, get out of COVID, get businesses back up and running, get unemployment, people back to work.
This Friday in the United Kingdom, the Conservative Party scored a stunning victory in the city of Hartlepool after Britain held its first major election since Brexit and the coronavirus crisis. Hartlepool, a Rust Belt constituency deep in the traditional Labour heartlands, which has never voted Conservative since creation in 1974, saw a 16% swing to the Tories. According to final results, the first to be announced after Thursday local and regional elections, Conservative candidate Jill Mortimer won 15,529 votes, almost twice as many as her Labour opponent Paul Williams. The newly elected candidate described the victory as a historic result and a momentous day, all this happening in a high-stakes local election that could prove crucial for the unity of the United Kingdom.
Labour have taken people in Hartlepool for granted for too long. I heard this time and time again on the doorstep. People have had enough. And now, through this result, the people have spoken and they've made it clear it's time for change. People voted for that positive change, for jobs and investment, and it's exactly what I'm going to deliver.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.